welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, and welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of Syosset Public Library. I'm Jen, a library aide here in media and programming, and today I'm here with a very special guest.
I'm Hilde Lysiak, and I'm the publisher of Hilde on the Record.
Fantastic. So let's start with the basics, if you don't mind. What made you want to write this book? Like, how did you arrive at this project?
So I started the Orange Street News, which was the newspaper that I published when I was 7. And I really started it because I loved telling other people's stories. But as I got older, I realized that there were more and more people telling my story and painting this narrative about me that just wasn't really accurate to who I was. I think they were painting me as a confrontational person. It wasn't in line with who I was. And I wanted to write this book to, share some of the lessons I learned being a reporter, but also set the record straight about me. And hopefully with this book, my goal overall was to maybe inspire someone who might be going through what I went through to get help.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of really moving and very effective stuff in this book. You go into how you arrived at reporting and how you found your way toward finding your own newspaper. But you also go really into your personal life and what you were going through over these years, which are, very formative years in a person's life. So let's start with, how you tell your story. One thing that I was super impressed with is the way that you write about your life in such great detail, especially your early life. Like, you remember things really vividly from when you were like 5, 6, 7. And I was wondering if, like, in addition to your memory, if you had to do any research, like, did you look at photographs? Did you talk to people? Like, how did you craft this story about yourself?
I wish I could say my memory was that good, but it really isn't. My mom actually helped me a lot out with some of the blanks that I needed to be filled in that I couldn't necessarily remember. Lots of photographs I looked at that we were getting out, and talking to people in my life, my family, who remember me when I was a lot younger for some of the things I couldn't remember.
Yeah, it must have been really interesting, because you had been used to, for a while now, researching other things and filling in the blanks in other people's story. Was it really interesting to kind of turn that eye on yourself?
It was really cool. It was definitely a bit strange because, like you said, I'm just, telling other people's stories and doing the same thing that I was doing for myself with this book was my job. So it was weird to turn the lens around a little bit to see. But it's cool. It was a fun experience.
That's great. And the book is so much fun to read. It really, it's fun to read, and you could tell that you were having a really good time writing it too. And even when you were getting to, some parts where you were kind of vulnerable and parts where you were going through some things, you have a really good perspective on your own experience. Another thing that I thought comes through from this book is your powers of observation, which obviously is like a great skill to have when you're a reporter. And I was most impressed by this when reading about how your dad brought you to your first big serious story when you were little. And you realized how stressed out he seemed about bringing you and how divided he was. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that first experience and, how you looked at it then at the time and how you see it now.
Yeah, so I think it's just being a people watcher is kind of who I am. I really like observing things and patterns in people. And with my dad, it was always the same way that all of my friends' parents, went away in the morning and they came back, 5 p.m. And I always just looked at it as a job, right? But for me, it was a little bit different than like my friend's parents because his job kind of affected our entire life. Like if we went on vacation, it was because he had a story there and the paper was flying him out somewhere. Sometimes we would be doing something. I remember one time we were about to go camping, right? And he had to get a call because he had the story to report on. And it definitely did as at least from what I could tell, take a little bit of a toll on him, which is why he eventually quit. He kind of gets into this in the book, but he quit, and then we maybe we could spend more time with all of us.
Yeah, and it seems like that was a decision that had a lot of impact on your family, like in a good way. And it also impacted your life because it was in his time that he was home that you really started to pursue your own journalistic interests, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I went with him on a decent amount of stories. So when he quit the paper, I realized how much I loved doing it because I wasn't able to do it anymore. So when we came, that's what the whole reason I started the paper. It was just because how much I missed it.
Mm. Yeah, and the way that the paper grows is just so interesting. And you talk about this so well in your book. Um, you know, you talk about how it starts out as the Sometimes, which I think is like a really clever title, like a very clever title for a very small child. And then it turns into the Orange Street News. So what was it like, taking on such a big project at such a young age, and how did it evolve for you?
Well, when I started it, I wish I could say I was starting it to, I don't know, change the world and inspire people, which has been an amazing thing that I had the opportunity to inspire younger people. But when I started I just started it because it was fun for me. I didn't look at it, I didn't think ever it was going to become what it became. I just did it because it was a hobby for me. And as it got larger, it became more of a job. I was focusing a lot of time on it, a lot more time than I was before. But it was, I wish I don't have a lot to compare it to because that was a lot of my childhood. So I don't like that is my normal for me. So this past year and a half where I haven't been doing the paper has been more normal to me than it was to have all of that.
I'm sure that it must have become such a big part of your life that it must have, felt a little odd to step away, but it probably gives you a lot of really good perspective, and it's sounds like it's resulted in this wonderful book, and so we've all gotten a lot out of it. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So did it change for you? When you started out doing it for yourself, and then eventually over time you get some subscribers from people on your block and people in the neighborhood. And did you find that that changed your process for you or how you approached the paper?
It definitely did. So at first, when I first got more subscribers, for me, it just meant more sources, which was amazing. And I completely loved that. And to be honest, a lot of the hate I got didn't really bother me too much, especially when I was younger. But I think as I got older, especially when I moved to Arizona and I was still doing the paper, it started to feel like more of a job for me, and it felt like more of an obligation. Although I do love reporting, it began to feel really heavy on me. So I'm pretty grateful that my parents did cut it off, when it was, because it felt like I don't know, like an obligation. And I still love reporting to this day, and I'm sure I'll return to it someday, but it was my sense of normalcy when I was a kid. And when you have that, and when you have a lot of people telling you you're special because of this thing, it's a difficult decision to cut it off. So I'm very thankful my parents did that for me.
That is really great. And I can see how it could be so hard. And to tell a little story about myself, like, in high school, I used to be really into acting, and I thought that's who I was. I was like, I want to be an actor, and that's it. And like, that's where all the meaning in my life is going to come from. But, as you grow older, like, that's not enough. Like, you need to find meaning in broader things, and you can't really identify too much with like one aspect of you. So do you feel like the experiences that you've had since then are going to contribute to, when you do return to it, or if you pursue more projects like that?
It's funny you bring that story up because ever since I was little, I wanted to be an actress. It wasn't like journalism was my hobby, and I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be a TV actress, or I wanted to be on Broadway, and that was my thing I really wanted to do. And it was just, journalism was a hobby for me. I never looked at it as like a career path. But I think in general, kind of to go back to what you were saying, I think even the way like media and TV shows portray things, they portray that your profession is your identity. It's like your entire thing that you should be doing. And I don't think that's necessarily true at all. And I think there's so many things outside of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I totally agree because, we live in a world where not everybody gets to do the job that they want to do necessarily. And you need to like find meaning in all aspects of your life. And I think it's really cool that you've like pursued so many things and that you excelled so much as a journalist when that wasn't even really like your main interest or your main goal. What I thought was you're welcome. What I thought was super interesting was how the paper became a really big part of your education. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience of moving from public school to homeschooling and how the paper gave you the skills that you would need sort of in your broader life.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So my schooling as a whole has been just insane for me. So I was in public school, right, when I first moved, and then obviously the paper progressed, I became homeschooled. But when I was homeschooled, of course I had other things that I like had to do, but really my main focus was on the paper, which I think was great, and I think it will help me out a lot in real life. But right now I'm in high school. I'm a sophomore. I'm in 10th grade, and there are just so many things that I'll be working. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to do MLA format, stuff like that. Yeah. But I think overall that will definitely help me in the long run, with the real life. But for now, I'm in school, so I'm definitely I'm watching. I have a Khan Academy membership, and I'm like watching all of the videos on how to do like 8th grade math. But I do think that my education reporting will help me with a lot of things, even outside of journalism. I think I got a lot of good people skills from that and how to talk to different types of people, because it was really my job to talk to people who've just been through something kind of awful usually and try to get them to open up and tell their story.
Let's talk about that for a second, because that is a very interesting part of being a journalist, that you sometimes have to talk to people right after something really bad has happened to them, and you want to be sensitive, but you also want to get the truth so that you can tell the story. And like, what is your personal approach to that? Have you had to do that a lot, or is it something that has that you have a technique for?
So I had people ask me this a bit when I was younger, and I had a completely different answer than what I think now. My answer before was about how I, separated my profession from my emotions. But in reality, I think that was very far from how I actually am. I'm a very emotional person, and I'm pretty empathetic. And it does take a toll when you're talking to people just been through something awful. It's like, me personally, I feel for people so much. So it does take a toll at the end of the day. It's not really something, you just get home and you turn it off and you're like, oh, well, that was work. But it really did just, it definitely was a lot for me. I couldn't just turn it off, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I imagine that it would be really difficult to kind of create that barrier to sort of just like deal with all these really difficult emotions during the day and then just turn off at night and, pretend it didn't happen, or just, like do whatever you have to do to kind of like get through it. So, and that has been a presence in your life from very early, because that first big story, I'm thinking of the time when you were at the parade in Crown Heights with your father and you had to go uptown. That's a really big, heavy topic for someone who's so young. And, what was it like encountering something that heavy and being so young? Did you think that you understood it all at the time, or did understanding grow over time?
Well, I think, I think the media painted this picture of me, right? And I had lots of people telling me that I was really kind of confrontational and I don't know, this just like super person, this like child prodigy who's just a workaholic. But I wasn't like that at all. But I had so many people telling me I was like that, so I kind of had to pretend I was like that, and I just had to pretend that all this stuff didn't really weigh on me as much as it did. I think it was it was really tough for me. I don't think I fully understood it though, just a lot of that because I was so adamant about being this picture that people were painting of me. So I had to just, it took me a while to fully soak it all in until I was a bit older.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Let's talk about what you just said a little bit, because that's super interesting about the, what people told you about yourself. Because it seems like something that you've had to grapple with for a long time. And, not to get all like feminist about it for a second, I imagine that it's something that you've had to deal with more than, say, a young boy reporter may have had to deal with. Like, do you think that was at work a little bit too?
I definitely do. This is another thing that when I was younger, I would have said something a little differently, because I do think that masculinity is really much associated with, being powerful in this person, and, masculine and emotionless is kind of how I was painted, and femininity and having emotions is considered weak. So I think that kind of plays into how people painted this image of me. And I definitely do think that if I was a little boy like doing that, it wouldn't be so much of it wouldn't be as big of a deal, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. It's really cool that you brought that up, because I actually have a PhD in masculinity studies, and I wrote about like medieval masculinity. And
That's so cool.
Thank you. And so, it's something that I think about a whole lot. And I, really thought about it a lot when I was reading your story, is that I think a lot of times when girls or women are told to be strong or to be confident or to be professional or whatever, oftentimes what people are really saying is like, you need to be like a man, you need to be like aggressive.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Completely. Yes.
Yeah. And so I think that it's really cool now that you're coming into yourself and like realizing that, you can be all those things and still, be true to your identity,
Definitely. So when I was younger, the whole thing about me was basically almost my tagline was, most little girls are like having tea parties and playing with Barbies, and she's out reporting crime. But in reality, I played with Barbies until I was too old to be playing with Barbies. I have a tea set to this day, and I still have tea parties with my little sisters. I was never that go get 'em, like emotionless person that people were painting me as.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot to manage when you're trying to balance your authenticity with like the image that the world has of you, And I think that's something that you grapple with really well in this book, that you get your story out there, you get your perspective, and you really assert your identity. Did you find that that was like a powerful or even like maybe therapeutic experience?
It definitely was. I think writing about some of the things I went through is a lot easier for me than talking about it, just because it's my art form. I'm a writer. It's what I love to do. But it was nice to get it all out there. When you're so young, it's tricky for anyone to figure out who they are. And then when you're having people constantly tell you who they think you are, it can be confusing. But writing this book was definitely a bit therapeutic for me.
That's great. I'm super glad to hear it, because it's almost like therapeutic to read, because I'm just like following your journey and I'm like, yeah, like so one thing I wanted to ask about was that since the beginning of your story, it seems like travel and movement have been really big parts of your life. Like first you traveled with your dad for stories, and then you had several moves during your childhood and during the Orange Street News years. And not to mention all of the exciting developments that followed, like the book series and the TV show, which I'm sure created their own like opportunities for travel. And I'm wondering how that all affected you. Do you like traveling? Do you like the hustle and bustle of all that?
Oh, I love traveling so much. It's to this day, one of my favorite things. I feel so lucky to be able to have that opportunity to see all these cool places. When I wrote Hilde Cracks the Case, it got released in Norway, and they flew me down to Oslo, and it was so cool. And I feel so lucky to be able to have had that experience. It was amazing.
Wow, that is
I love traveling.
Yeah, that is really cool. And it's probably fun to travel, like do you get to balance all of the like official duties with like some free time in these places, or is it all business all the time?
Oh no, it's not all business. I'll usually go. For example, when I went to Oslo, I went with my grandma, and it was so much fun. We did so many fun things, and of course, there are the things you have to do, but even those were really are usually really fun because usually the work stuff is like going with like a bunch of like really cool like writing people and just talking to them about these interesting things, and that's really fun.
Oh yeah, that does sound fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like a fun kind of work.
it definitely is. It's really cool.
Oh, that's great. And like, I'm so glad that you really enjoy travel and especially traveling with your parents. Like, it's a really great way to generate memories and to get new experiences that create new writing, like you kind of have to have new experiences to keep writing.
Definitely, yeah.
Mhm. So as part of this whole, journey, you've met so many interesting people. For instance, you talk about meeting Malala in the book, which is like utterly amazing. Like she's such an inspirational figure. And like who were like was there a most meaningful meeting for you, or like what like how do you feel about all these like these people you've met?
I don't know if I can pick, like a most meaningful to me,
Mm.
but Malala was definitely up there, not only because she's absolutely amazing, but also meeting her. I was really pretty little when I met her, and I read her book and everything, and it was an amazing experience, but it also made me kind of sad because it made me realize that there's so many girls out there who are 10 times smarter than me, who will never be able to do what I was able to do because of where they live or because of their circumstances. And that was just a really difficult thing for me to grasp with, but I think it was important that I understood it.
Absolutely. That's a very powerful lesson to learn so young. I think a lot of us spend the early years of our life kind of, thinking that the world revolves around us or that everybody lives the way that we do, everybody experiences the same things. And you, not only through your journalism, but through everything that followed, you've been exposed to so many different perspectives and attitudes and experiences. And that's really very interesting.
Thank you. It was really interesting to experience, and I'm hoping I'll be able to have some more of those opportunities in the future.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's talk about that as we, kind of wrap things up a little bit. So what are you working on now, if anything? I know you're in school. Is there anything you've got like, bubbling in a pot somewhere, any projects you're working on, or like what's going on?
Okay, so since I quit journalism like a year and a half ago, I've realized that I have so many other passions and interests. I think I might, when they were making Home Before Dark, I was able to go on set for that, and I realized how much, because I always wanted to be an actress, but I realized how cool the behind the scenes work was, and I think I might want to be a filmmaker, but I
Ooh,
also really like math, so if there's a chance I want to be an engineer or a biochemical engineer, I think that would be so fun. But
ooh.
I'm still figuring things out. But I think filmmaking is something that I would love to go into.
That's really cool. I think those are two very cool paths. Like those are very neat interests. Do you think you might ever write a book again, or do you think that's something that you want to return to?
Yeah, I think it's more realistic for me writing like a book in the future, maybe a fiction book. I really love writing short stories.
Mm,
And this isn't something I have, like rolling yet or anything, but I think it'd be really fun to write a book of short stories. I
mm.
think that'd be so cool.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to see like how your journalistic eye shapes your fiction writing. I would love to see that.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Well, this has been absolutely fascinating, and I want to thank you so much for coming to talk to me. And I want to congratulate you on your book. It's a major achievement in a life full of amazing achievements. Um, and it's really honest and thoughtful and brave, and I really loved it.
Thank you so much. This has been so fun. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. So this has been Jen with Turn the Page podcast in conversation with Hilde, author of Hilde on the Record, coming to a bookstore or a library near you in April. It is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.